Do you remember how we used to have lunch in the park?
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you remember that one time we're all just sitting around in a circle eating lunch?
I think I know where you're going with.
And then we hear like a plop.
Yep.
Turns out a bird has poop in the middle of your lunch box.
I was so upset.
I know. And we look up and the bird is still sitting right there. You stare at the lunchbox for such a long time. And then
Yeah, I was gonna eat it.
I remember there was like just a random woman.
Yeah.
And she was like, just eat around it.
Yep.
And then at that moment, you finally were like, I can't eat around it. It's in the middle and there's splatter everywhere.
Yep. I can't believe that happened though. Catherine just talked about that maybe like 3 weeks ago too. We were like, yeah, we should have ate outside. And it's like, no way. We're not eating outside anymore.
No more food waste.
No more food waste.
This man, who is so obsessed with reducing food waste, is Robert Lee, my first boss. He is the founder of Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, a non-profit food rescue organization. Here is what RLC does.
We bring excess food from different restaurants, food businesses, to homeless shelters, soup kitchens, food pantries, and that way people can eat it instead of, it going to waste.
And here is Robert's pitch on why what RLC does is important.
Approximately 30% of the food in the world produced is wasted. In the US, it's even worse. 40% of the food that's produced goes to waste. Obviously, that has a lot of moral concerns and impacts. Why are we cultivating livestock that don't need to be raised in these conditions just to be slaughtered for no reason? But also, people can be eating that food, right? Especially people who are food insecure. And then nowadays, it's a huge issue of climate change. We're using half the US land, 80% of the US fresh water, and 10% of the US energy budget to bring food to our tables, and then we're wasting 40% of that. And then when we waste it, it goes to landfills instead of normal aerobic digestion. It goes through anaerobic digestion and produces methane gases. So 30 times worse for the environment than carbon dioxide. It's just so many, implications, economic, moral, environmental impacts that food rescue kind of touches on. People can make a difference 3 times a day, and anytime they want, they can rescue with RLC.
But this story is about Robert and why he has dedicated 10 years of his youth to RLC. Let's start from the very beginning.
I was born and raised in New York, born to 2 Korean immigrants looking for a better life for their kid. My brother and I grew up in Queens, firstly in Whitestone. We kind of moved around a lot. And I had a typical kind of immigrant upbringing where we struggled. My parents didn't know how to speak English. We learned early on to be like interpreters for our parents. I grew up thinking food insecurity was normal for everyone. I thought everyone was struggling to find food. Growing up, sometimes eating just a bowl of ramen and that would be it. Or watching my mom skip meals, or like walk miles instead of taking the bus just to save, at that time, probably like $1 for the fare. And always bugging my parents, hey, can we eat like a different type of ramen today? And like, to me, eating at Pizza Hut was the top, the pinnacle. For me, it was just a part of life. Obviously, until I grew up and realized that's not the case.
So, when did you realize it was not the case?
I think it was like a slow, gradual realization. When I was in kindergarten, I remember being shocked that my classmates would cut off the ends of their sandwiches and throw out like carrots and apples because they just didn't like it. Like whole apples saran wrapped. And I was like, what? I was like, why would you do that? Like, I would just take it out of the trash because this is a huge waste, but also B, this is great food, So hanging out at friends' houses, over time I realized, hey, not everyone, shares a room. So some people have their own room, and I'm like, what? That's crazy. That kind of thing.
That was a realization, but I assume you never grew up thinking like, oh, I'm gonna reduce food waste as a career.
No way.
So what did you had in mind?
Well, when I was a kid, when I didn't know anything, I loved dinosaurs. So I always told people in elementary school I was going to be a paleontologist.
So nerdy.
So I think it's like a typical little kid thing. And I want to be an architect because I love building things. I used to build little rafts with toothpicks and stuff like that, like stupid stuff. Eventually, when I started to really think about what I wanted to do, I was like, man, I don't want to go to school anymore because it's just so much opportunity cost because I'd be working instead. So I started getting a paid job. I got my working papers when I was 14. I decided I wanted to just make a ton of money so that I didn't have to worry about money again. Most of it was just struggles of being behind on rent. My parents, as we got older, just started to not hide that kind of thing. They would just complain about it openly. And that secondhand stress started to get to me. Eventually, I landed on finance as the thing that I wanted to do because I didn't have to go to additional schooling, which meant I didn't have to put down more money for schooling and more time. And I could make as much, if not more, money being a doctor or lawyer, as all Asian parents probably want for their children.
Those are great reasoning, but how did you even know about all the different careers? I feel like when I applied to college, I had no idea what the different careers are going to be like, or what it takes to like get there.
Yeah, it's a great question. That was the same. I did a bunch of odd jobs just to like learn what kind of jobs existed. But the finance thing specifically happened because when I was in high school, one of my friends' dads worked at a hedge fund. Her dad just basically got me in, and I was just kind of like just a data entry monkey, essentially. At the time, actually, the '08 crisis was just happening. So I was like watching it all go down. And it was just fascinating to me. Not only that people were losing lots of money, but also people were making a lot of money on the losses that people were having too. And I was like, it just showed me that there's opportunity in like literally everything. That's how I first learned about finance.
That is crazy.
Yeah, sometimes a lot of it is like a lot of things that happen in your life and you're like, you know what, I want to do this.
Yeah, the opportunities you get to come across.
Yeah. In college, I still wasn't sure. Like, my dad was a supermarket manager, and honestly, what I thought most business was. And then finance opened my eyes to the whole world of high finance. While I was in college, I was thinking, is that all there is? Like, can I learn more? And so you specifically because, the whole like in and of the city thing got me. And I was like, man, yeah, I want to be in the city and learning about
hustling,
applying what I was learning. Maybe hustling is a term as well, but ended up trying to get at least 2 part-time jobs while also studying. Part of it was also like, I want to attribute to my parents' fund here and pay rent. The other part was trying to get more experience. I ended up working at large for-profit companies like UBS, Morgan, but also large nonprofit, and then also small for-profit companies like Plus Grade, which is a startup that upgrades your airline seats. It got me to realize there's just so many different types of companies, incentive models, structures. Overall, I just got to learn that there's just a lot of different types of people. So it helped me solidify what the perspective is and where I want to be in that perspective.
And on top of all these different jobs that Robert tried, he also ran into food rescue before he officially became a finance guy.
I was a bright-eyed college student looking to do random things. And so the first week at the Club Pub Fest, I just went around and whatever interested me, I just learned more about it. I don't know if you know this, but I was also the NYU Bobcat.
The mascot?
There's like a bunch of different suits and they all smell pretty bad.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I did a lot of random, ridiculous stuff. But then I was also just really intrigued by this club that was called Two Birds, One Stone. They had just started, and essentially they brought leftover dining hall food to homeless shelters. And to me, I never heard of that concept. I thought it was legal, just like everyone else. It really opened my eyes to the whole food rescue industry, and it just resonated with me. And as I got to know more about them, I learned that they didn't work on weekends. I was such a jerk. I was like, man, we have to work on weekends.
Oh my God.
We have to rescue food on weekends too. People need to eat on weekends. So essentially, I joined the club as one of the executive team members as a freshman, first semester, just to solve that one problem.
Just so everyone knows, it's unusual for a freshman to just join an organization and become the president.
I just lobbied and lobbied. Once we solved that, I was like, just so much more that we can do. We can work with all the dining halls. We can work with like the Argo Tea or like the Starbucks inside campus, right? And there were just a lot of different things that kind of started to intrigue me and it eventually kind of took over my life.
That was during college.
Yeah.
Did you have the idea that you were going to do something like food rescue for a full-time job?
Never crossed my mind. When I was at NYU, my main objective was to make a lot of money and start my own business. And I took like courses at Stern for entrepreneurship. That specifically because I knew I wanted to start my own business. The advice that I got from a lot of professors and like mentors was go to finance, build your network, build up your assets, and then when you're stable and when you're able to, and you have the perspective of what makes a successful company, and then start a business. That way you can raise funds easier. That was the original plan.
What actually happened?
What actually happened? In junior year, in the summer, I had an internship with JP Morgan and I loved it. They gave me a full-time offer, so I signed right away. And in senior year, I started really thinking about what my life would be like after college. You should probably think about it a little earlier, especially if you're going to sign your life away. So I started thinking about like two birds, one stone. This club that had been a big part of my life, I didn't want it to stop. The succession planning and all that, went really well. And we had people who can take over, but wanted it to be something that was beyond the borders of NYU. We heard about a venture competition, so we applied for some venture funding. We didn't even win first place, we won second place. We took that money and started RLC. Rescuing Leftover Cuisine was supposed to be like a placeholder name. It was just something for the venture competitions, but it ended up being the permanent name, which I feel bad for everyone who's worked at RLC. While I was working at JP Morgan, I would meet with Paul and Lisa, the other co-founders, on weekends, and we would just grow it little by little. Eventually, we came to the point where we needed to bring a person on full time to keep growing the organization. And I had been at JP Morgan for about a year, and I wanted to learn faster on how to start a business, be in the weeds, and really learn everything from start to finish. It was selfish. It was not just a noble thing that I wanted to help. Obviously I wanted that, but it also aligned with my professional and personal interests as well.
It's still a risky decision, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Giving up a cushy job at JP Morgan to work on a business, but it's still a nonprofit. It's not like you're doing it for the money.
Yeah, no, my parents thought I was crazy. I've been telling my friends and everyone, that I'm going to do this. And they just didn't believe me. I had so many people in finance that just complain and hate their jobs and they say they're going to quit and they never do. Or they do, slowly. And for me, I just decided, hey, I'm going to do this. And when I quit, my parents didn't talk to me for a year. They were like, you wasted your Gates Name scholarship, you wasted your college degree, you just wasted your whole life. And I was like, oh well, it is what it is.
That's brave.
A lot of people want to do, something similar. And I always encourage people to plan and really be prudent about the decision, right? Because it's a risky decision, as you said. And I was lucky enough to have no college debt. I thought about the fact that, I don't have kids, I don't have other obligations. I can try this. Yes, it's a risk, but it's not like I'm going to put any dependent risk as well. I put together like a little budget. And
what was the budget?
So I decided to pay myself minimum wage. And
can you give me the number? Like, what? I mean, because we're already past that. So, like, what was your wage at JP Morgan? And what was your wage the first year at RLC?
So, wage at JP Morgan, all in with the bonus, 100K. And then switching to RLC. The budget is actually all online, and you can actually see how much I paid myself. I believe it was like 32K.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm used to not going on like extravagant, vacations. I'm used to like eating probably shitty food, which is not good for you. And you definitely should eat healthier and people should care about their health more. I just put together this budget and decided, hey, I'm going to try this for a year and I need to get to this point, this point, this point. If I'm not, I'm just going to go to a business school. I had already taken the GMATs. I'd already done all that. So I was ready to go if it all failed. So I always encourage people, put together a budget, see what you can live with, set yourself a goal and a timeline. And you don't have to be like super rigid. You could give yourself more or less time if you need to, and then have a backup plan, right? If you don't make it, it's not a huge deal. It's not the end of the world.
One follow-up question. Why do you think it's so difficult for people in finance to like quit their job?
I think there's so much risk in leaving a job and the stable income. I think people are scared that they're not going to be able to find their ideal job. It's scary opening yourself up to that kind of risk. It's not like the status quo is really that bad, right? Like you're not like starving unless there's something like really really pushing you out the door. Finding a job is not the easiest thing either. Like you have to like actively look for a job and actively apply and actively interview and do all this networking and stuff like that.
So was there like a deciding factor?
For me, yeah, I mean, because my goal was to start a business and, learn as much as possible. My main thing was when I interned at JP Morgan, it was really great. I was trained in investment banking and then went back to work at full time at asset management. And I basically saw that things were kind of the same. After 1 year, nothing kind of changed.
Oh, like you were not learning.
Yeah, exactly. So I learned a lot in my internship. So I just had these high expectations. And then when I came back and realized that there wasn't that much more to learn, I was kind of upset. And I had all these thoughts about like, how do I learn? So I signed up for the JP Morgan mentoring program. I started learning VBA code and automating my job.
I remember because you said you were like automating your jobs to the point where you have nothing to do, so you were coding this game on the mobile app, the circle that eats things.
That's right. Spicy Sprint. Yes. Check it out. Yes, I did all kinds of crazy things. I think when you're younger, you just want to learn things and do things. And I thought I could learn more by doing RLC. And man, definitely did. Too much.
Let's get to the main story.
Yeah.
What was it like starting a whole nonprofit organization? And it's still going, which is a huge success. And you guys have saved
12 million. Yeah.
pounds of
Nice. Good research.
food. Maybe tell me about the first year and then whatever highlights of the journey that you have remembered the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much. The first year was honestly really like enjoyable, but also tough. Physically more demanding. My goal was to get to a certain number of pounds. Like I wanted to make a certain amount of impact. The goals that I set before I left, it was to prove the concept. So in the first year, I would spend the normal workday 9 to 5 working on the organization. In the morning, I would try and recruit food donor partners, just making phone calls and stuff like that. And then in the afternoon, I would go and try and recruit rescuers, and so on online websites. And then after 5 p.m. usually is where all the pickups start. I would do pickups all the way until midnight. And I would do that every day.
It's actually hard work.
Yeah, I was like carrying 120 pounds at one point. But yeah, I realized that was really dumb.
Okay. So tell me more.
Well, I basically realized I should be working more on the business and rather than in the business, working to grow the organization and making it scalable rather than putting my body and time on the line. Because then the max that the organization can ever be is what I'm physically able to do, right? That first year, although we kind of met our goals, I realized that kind of wasting my time a little bit. I could have, accelerated the growth faster if I had trained other people to help with the cause rather than, me doing everything myself.
How did you started growing the organization instead?
Yeah, I started to think about like, how do we get consistent help, right? And consistent growth. And the number one thing became hiring people. Firstly, we want to hire people so that we can have people pitching to food donor partners and bringing them on, as well as training people to train rescuers so that they can go exponentially expand the rescuer base. All of that costs money. And so I started to, focus my time and efforts on fundraising.
How do you fundraise? It is not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. Well, if you want to be a venture-backed startup, typically it's a similar process, right? You put together your deck, your materials, you put together your team, a list of prospects, basically spam them, essentially try to get like a meeting with them. So you email them, you LinkedIn them, you call them and get rejected left and right? And on the off chance you do get a meeting, you don't even know why you got a meeting, right? It just, felt nice that day. Even then, you don't have a guarantee that you're actually gonna get funding, right? Or the amount that you asked for. Now, obviously, for-profit fundraising, the amounts are also much larger because the VC firms or angel investors are actually looking for a return on their investment, right? They're not just giving the money away. I remember going to conferences and there would be people who would come up to me and be like, hey, I'm interested in, investing in your business. And then when they find out I'm a nonprofit, immediately like it's like 1/10 of like the dollar amounts we're talking about. It's kind of sad to see that because as a nonprofit, you can still income and earn revenue, and you can still grow as fast as a for-profit can. But the lack of incentive, the equity, and the ownership is something I noticed early on. But in terms of nonprofit fundraising, even for-profit fundraising, my philosophy really is that people give to people. Most of the time, people are funding the founders because the business idea may pivot multiple times, and the business idea might be a good one, but it might be too early for the market. So reaching out to people, telling them my story, telling them why I'm doing this, and the impact that it'll have has allowed us to build up the donor base that we've been building.
I think I asked this already, but what are the most memorable like milestones?
Oh man, I feel like there's so many, right?
Maybe like top 5.
Top five? Oh man, I'm just gonna list them off and then maybe I'll get to five. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The first one was like probably like the impact stories. We just heard so many stories about how the food was helping, and directly on the ground started making like a folder called the good file, and that was a milestone, starting to collect those stories and not just like feel good about them right, like having them so that we could share them. And then number two, I'd say we were really lucky and had the opportunity to be a incubatee in the Blue Ridge Labs incubator program run by Robin Hood Foundation. And at that point, I've been doing RLC for 2 years full time. I wasn't sure if things were actually really working and going the way I was hoping for. I hadn't really fundraised as much as I hoped that year. And so when we got in and got health insurance and got just basic things, it helped us really formulate the technology as well as our earned revenue stream. So for the first 2 years, we provided the service of rescuing food for free. And the Blue Ridge Labs incubator program really helped us think about how do we make this more sustainable, financially sustainable. That was how we started like experimenting with our 25 cents per pound cost. And then eventually we switched to actually just charging a flat fee. And then, I'd say there was a point in time we also like accelerated very quickly. We took 3 years or 4 years to get to our first 1,000,000 pounds of food cumulatively. But then the year right after that, we actually did 1,000,000 in just 1 year. And now we're aiming to do 4 million this year. But yeah, COVID, surviving COVID.
How was it? How did you guys survive?
Yeah, I mean, COVID was really disruptive, right? Like we heard from our nonprofit recipients that there was so much demand and we'd see lines wrapped around multiple blocks. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, all of our partners closed, but they had a lot of inventory because they had to close so suddenly. So for the first like 2-3 months, we were just like distributing all that excess inventory out. And so we were able to meet some of the demand. By the time it was May, all this inventory that's obsolete and stuff now is taken care of. What do we do next? We had options. We could just like chill, right? Because that's what the government wanted us to do. And that was just BS. Like we're not going to sit around while there's like a massive line of people who need food. So we started to work up the supply chain. And so we saw that supermarkets were thriving and had lots of excess food. So we started to try and work with them, manufacturers of the food, rescuing obsolete inventory that was more like packaged, a little bit more shelf-stable. Now that COVID has receded, we want to continue to retain that while bringing on our past partners. I'm greedy. I don't want to give up either one. Like I don't want to lose what we gained during the pandemic. I want to do both and I want to grow both. because both have needs, and we can do both.
That's awesome. 5 years ago, I asked you, what are your plans for the next 5 to 10 years? And you said you can see yourself working on RLC for the next 5 to 10 years. And you're still, 5 years later, working at RLC, thriving. So now, where do you see yourself in like 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's a good it's a good question. We're at the end of our second year of our 3-year plan and taking next year to kind of think about our next 3 to 5 year plan. And so when I think about what's next for the organization, we invested a lot heavily into technology. Now we're at 15 full-time, part-time staff. For me, it's a lot. I know it's still like incredibly small for a lot of people. But, I think my perspective is as I see myself staying in this role and in this organization as much as I can provide value, right? So if I can continue to grow and learn as fast as possible, and that meets the demands that the organization has, and I can continue to be the best CEO. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that maybe if we had a CEO who actually knew how to scale an organization from 15 to 50 or to 100 people, then it's way better. I'd say that a lot of the growth going forward can still lead, and so I do see myself still being involved in the next 5 years, but maybe in 10 years there's someone else who can grow this organization way faster and way more. So I just want to be open to that.
Okay, beautiful. So, last question. I know it was a risky decision to leave the finance job and your parents didn't talk to you for a year. Do you feel like you can now still take care of like your parents and like maybe start a family if you want to and sustain yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. People think that like if you work at a nonprofit, you can't do any of those things, but you can. And I kind of want to challenge that notion that like you have to like give up your life. I know that like for me to start this organization, I know I talked about how big a massive pay cut that I took, but like not everyone has to do that. I recently was able to purchase a house in Stamford, Connecticut, and so I definitely think that it's possible. It's not like you have to give up everything just to work at a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome.
You are listening to Young, Dumb, and Brave, the podcast that talks about young people making brave choices in a life full of uncertainty. See you the next episode.